So I want you guys to think back to the late 90s and early 2000s. Alternative music was king, with bands like Nine Inch Nails, A Perfect Circle and Deftones not just being all over the radio, but creating and defining this generation of a sound with aggressive, honest and raw music. It was an era of rock gods who just seemed to show up fully formed and ready to take the stadium. But what if I told you there was a supergroup started by a core member of Nine Inch Nails and featured singers from The Cure, Japan, and even a guest spot from the guitarist of The Smiths, releasing what should have been one of the biggest albums of the decade, only to basically just disappear. This is the story of Tweaker, the supergroup that should have conquered the world. Now, to really get what made Tweaker so special, you have to start with the guy who built it all, Chris Vrenna. If you were a fan of industrial music in the 90s, you absolutely know Vrenna's work, even if you don't recognize his name. As the drummer for Nine Inch Nails during their most important and arguably formative years, right up until 1996, Vrenna wasn't just keeping time for the band, he was this key part of the band. His aggressive, perfectly programmed rhythms and his touch on electronic textures were felt in albums like The Downward Spiral, which very much helped create the very sound that shot and catapulted Nine Inch Nails into the stratosphere of music, popular music, and pop culture as a whole. But after he left Nine Inch Nails, he became this go-to producer and collaborator, working with a wild list of artists who were as varied as U2, to the Smashing Pumpkins, to even Marilyn Manson. But Vrenna had these ideas that didn't just quite fit anywhere else. He talked about having these creative sparks, these moments where he'd think, God, if I had no rules, maybe I would try something like this. And those sparks, those ideas without any rules, that's what became the project known as Tweaker. It was his solo project, his passion project, a space for him to just let loose and experiment in his home studio. And right away, the debut album, 2001's The Attraction to All Things Uncertain, set the tone for what Tweaker was going to be. This wasn't just a Nine Inch Nails rehash, this was something else, and it came with a guest list that was honestly unbelievable for a first album. The very first voice you hear belongs to David Sylvian, the iconic, mysterious frontman of the band Japan. His signature croon on the opening track Linoleum was a huge statement. The band also had Craig Wedden from the celebrated band Shudder to Think and the indie folk legend Will Oldham, who definitely set the tone with this industrial, dark electronic meets folk rock kind of vibe. All in all, it was an art rock dream team, put together by a musician who clearly had everyone's respect. Now, by the time the second album, 2am Wake Up Call, and personally a favourite of mine, dropped in 2004, guitarist Clint Walsh was a permanent member and fixture, and the guest list on this album just got even more insane. This time, Vrenna got vocals from Robert Smith of The Cure.
Made from the tears of Robert Smith.
Just imagine that for a second. The man who inspired Trent Reznor, the man who Trent Reznor would induct into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the man who would inspire Trent Reznor, who would in turn inspire Chris Vrenna to work with Trent Reznor. I mean, it was all coming full circle with this. The voice of Just Like Heaven he was, and Love Song, floating over these dark electronic soundscapes from an ex-Nine Inch Nails member. It was a mind-blowing team up with Vrenna and with Robert Smith, and he wasn't the only legend on there. Johnny Marr, the guitarist from The Smiths, brought his iconic guitar work to a track. The album also felt Hamilton Lighthouser from the Walkmen. Will Oldham came back for another song, of course, and so did Jennifer Charles of Elysian Fields. This lineup wasn't just a band, it was this proof of the serious respect Vrenna had in the music world and for the artists that he welcomed onto this latest album. It brought together this collection of rock royalty, a true supergroup built on a shared love for creating something totally unique. The stage was set, the players were in place, the promise was absolutely immense. But was the outcome immense? So what did this supergroup actually sound like? Well, imagine the dark industrial vibe of Nine Inch Nails, but you strip away the raw anger and rebuild it into something more cinematic, sad and atmospheric. Tweaker's music, blending swirling electronics with live instruments, created this sound that was part trip-hop, part synth-pop, and even part modern jazz in some instances, all seen through this dark, electronic, alternative rock filter. The first album, The Attraction to All Things Uncertain, is a moody cinematic ride. It's an album full of eerie electronic rock songs that feel like they were put together with incredible care. Tracks like Swamp and Happy Child show off Vrenna's knack for creating these haunting soundscapes that are somehow both unsettling and beautiful. The music grabs you with its complex, layered beats and textures, but it's the weird song structures which I like and that will keep you listening. It felt experimental. It felt strangely familiar, but also appealing to fans of Massive Attack and Portishead, just as much as it did to industrial rock fans who were looking for something fresh and something new. Then, of course, came 2 a.m. wake-up call in 2004, and everything sort of clicked into this sharp singular focus for Chris Vrenna. It was a concept album based on a month-long bout of insomnia that his wife was going through. She would wake up almost every single night at exactly 2 a.m. Soon, Vrenna found himself right there with her, awake and discovering this weird well of creative energy in those quiet pre-dawn hours. He gave all his collaborators a simple prompt for this record. What keeps you up at night? What do you dream about? And the result is a masterpiece of nighttime atmosphere. The album kicks off with Ruby, a track that builds from a simple arpeggiator into this explosive, corrosive chorus that feels like a dream twisting into a nightmare. Then you get Truth Is, where Robert Smith's unmistakable voice floats over a bed of tense electronics, sounding like a lost track from The Cure's more experimental days, while David Sylvian's track Pure Genius is this strutting, swinging song in a weird time signature that he said was like the internal self-delusion dialogue of bedroom guitars. But one of the most incredible moments comes with The House I Grew Up In, an instrumental track featuring Johnny Marr on guitar in an album that's so defined by its darkness. Vrenna said the song was the subplot, the moment the sun starts to rise. Marr's guitar provides this little glimmer of hope in all the gloom. The whole album feels like a journey through the night, from that initial anxiety of being wide awake, through the surreal landscapes of late night thoughts and dreams, all the way to a fragile dawn. Critics absolutely loved it for its rich textures and innovative sound. It was a true audiophile's record. And beyond the albums, Vrenna's range was just crazy. Tweaker composed the super heavy metal theme music for the video game Doom 3, a track so heavy and chugging it could easily be mistaken for Tool, and also created the theme for the animated series Shaolin Showdown. The project was just a showcase for Vrenna's creative vision, a fusion of styles and moods that was unlike anything else out there. So, with this killer lineup, this unique and acclaimed sound, what went all wrong and contributed to the ultimate hiatus of Tweaker? Why isn't Tweaker talked about in the same way as the legendary bands its members come from and its guests come from? Well, it wasn't one big dramatic thing, it was more like a perfect storm of little things and incidentals that seemed to creep up in the shadows. First, and maybe most importantly, it's the music itself. Even though it came from the world of Nine Inch Nails, Tweaker just wasn't Nine Inch Nails. It's more atmospheric, quieter, and way less aggressive. Fans who showed up looking for another Head Like a Hole or Closer found something that felt more akin to a movie score. And that difference meant Tweaker couldn't just ride the coattails of Nine Inch Nails fame. He was trying to introduce his old fans to a brand new song, which is a really tough sell for any artist of any medium. The second huge problem was promotion, or really the lack thereof it. Vrenna always called Tweaker his passion project. It was the thing he did for himself without pressure from labels or needing to have a hit. And that artistic freedom has a double-edged sword to it. It let him make things and music the way he wanted to on one hand, but on the other hand, it also meant that there was never a big marketing machine behind it, which is probably what Tweaker would have needed to elevate it to the next tier. Tweaker never really got the media attention or radio play that a major label would have given a band, assuming their marketing team was fully behind it. And in a moment of unbelievably bad timing, the first album came out on September 11th, 2001, which we all know what happened September 11th, 2001. Which Vrenna said completely wrecked any plans for a tour. And then you have to think about Vrenna's role. In Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor is and was the face of the band, the undeniable frontman, the singer, the main writer and driving force behind that band. Vrenna, as the drummer and programmer, was essential but way less visible. When he left, most of the fan base naturally stuck with Reznor. Vrenna's solo work just flew under the radar for a lot of people. Even with the star power from his guests, the project was still seen as a side project, not the main event. Vrenna even admitted later that having so many guests on the second album might have confused some people and made the project feel less like a cohesive band. And then finally, the huge gaps between albums made it impossible to build any sort of real momentum. I think the biggest momentum that I ever heard about regards to Tweaker, and this is from a fan who was closely following their output, was when they toured with Skinny Puppy. And that was back in 2004. And then after, well, almost immediately after that tour, Vrenna was asked to fill in on drums for Marilyn Manson, and that gig ended up producing and co-writing albums, and it was for almost 8 years. So because Tweaker was the passion project, it very much had to take a back seat to what naturally paid the bills. And I mean, at the end of the day, a man's got to eat. And unfortunately, because of that, by the time he eventually came back to Tweaker, the whole musical landscape had changed. So yeah, even though it never really blew up commercially, Tweaker is this monumental artistic achievement. The project did continue, with Vrenna releasing Call the Time Eternity in 2012, and then There's Nothing in 2013, proving that it was still his creative outlet. And for anyone willing to dig a little deeper than the mainstream charts, Tweaker's albums are a treasure trove of dark, beautifully made electronic rock, but therein lies the problem. You do have to dig in beyond the main music charts. If you're looking for a certain unique moment when a bunch of musical icons got together, not for a paycheck necessarily, but just because they love to create, it's a great hidden gem, a testament to Chris Vrenna's incredible talent sitting in the shadow of giants. So Tweaker really leaves me as one of music, or the music industry's biggest what-if stories. What if the promotion had been bigger? What if the timing had been better? What if the world had just been ready for a sound that was so far ahead of its time? The unfortunate thing is I'll never know, you'll never know, but the music is still there, ready to be enjoyed on the evil streaming platform Spotify and wherever else you can find it, because it is ready to be rediscovered by a brand new generation. So now I'd like to hear from you. What do you guys think about Tweaker? Leave your comments below. Have you listened to any Tweaker albums? What are your thoughts of Tweaker in context of what he originally did with 9 Inch Nails and what he went on to do with Marilyn Manson? Hit a like and subscribe, followed by the bell for all the latest videos just like this one and updates.